Missouri governor signs bill protecting babies born alive after attempted abortions. And this is just one of those stories, Sarah, that I guess you have to say, who on earth was opposing this? And it doesn't actually surprise me that people were opposing this, but it's the kind of thing that any civilized person would or should feel shocked by, that there was opposition to some kind of act like this that protects babies who are born alive after being attempted to be killed in an abortion.
And in fact, I think it's a lot more common than people realize. That is, they're just leaving a baby to die because, I don't know, I paid for an abortion, therefore the baby has to die, apparently is the mantra for that. But this also occurred on a nationwide level. So there have been lots of efforts to pass a nationwide version of the Born Alive Protection Act. And Nancy Pelosi notoriously refused to bring it to the floor for a House vote over and over again. So the number of people who actually find themselves willing to fight against this is actually shocking and mainstream. It's one of the things that, I don't know, it kind of radicalized me in terms of realizing just how evil some of these people are. Because, I mean, you can argue the ins and outs. Like, I can understand the people who are arguing and not really understanding, like, when does a baby become alive, right?
They just don't get the science of it or the rationale behind it.
And they're just like, maybe it's 6 weeks, maybe it's 8 weeks, maybe it's 12 weeks. All these different conversations. I can at least understand where they're coming from. They're confused or they're misinformed. Like, I get that. But when someone's going, okay, there's a baby who has been born and it's in front of you, you know, and you hear these horrific stories, Jake, about them like putting the baby in a freezer and such things. And it's because or
getting abandoned in a dumpster behind the facility or something like that.
Because they don't consider the baby to be, I don't know, a baby. Because somebody paid for that baby's death. I can't put this in like non-grotesque terms because I don't know how you would. But it's been both a nationwide issue, and then also here a state issue. But I am glad to see that we at least got a state here that recognized the issue and that had enough momentum to be able to say, no, these babies are babies. I think the reason, though, or at least part of the reason, that this passed, and I regret having to admit this, but is most likely because this was actually part of another bill. So it wasn't just here's the Born Alive Protection Act kind of thing, but rather this is inside of a bill that has a lot of different protections for children. And therefore it didn't get as much attention by pro-abortion advocates. But and by the way, one of the people, several people in one of our chats just mentioned that like Nancy Pelosi, like stalwart Catholic, and that's one of the troubles, like with some of the decisions that people like her made, and not just her, but, you know, like while pretending to be or claiming to be Catholic. And that's why I was really glad when we had her bishop refuse to offer her communion, to try to bring her back into the fold and to admit that, no, she's actually not part of the visible church right now. You know, she is dissenting from that.
Dissenting, exactly. And that's, again, we reported on this yesterday with the Catholic bishop in France saying that any Catholic French politician who votes for that euthanasia bill cannot present themselves for Holy Communion. They must be forbidden. And we need to pray for and support any bishop. This might happen that you have a bishop who you don't particularly like. Maybe he's not a great bishop in your diocese for whatever your personal reasons are. Maybe that's what you're thinking. But if he takes a stand on any issue that is deeply Catholic and does have this stance against what the world is saying, you must absolutely support him, especially publicly. Say, thank you, Bishop, for standing up for this. So it may come to that point where you've got bishops who normally we would be frustrated with for whatever reason, but maybe it's euthanasia that is the point that kind of wakes them up and says, oh, I have to take a stand against this. And this is something I was actually discussing yesterday as a follow-up just with some friends talking about this topic, is that euthanasia might be the issue that hits a bishop close to home because they are older themselves, or they have older relatives that they've dealt with. Maybe they've been disconnected from the abortion debate for whatever reason, and they've been, you know, and so they're backing away because they don't want to cause a fuss, they don't want to cause political division, and they convince themselves that they don't need to actually be that vocal about it. And then something like the euthanasia bill comes up, and there's a similar sort of evil. and that's what hits them close to home, and so they take a stand. Pray for them, support them, so that they can then be encouraged in that kind of ability to stand against the world. And with support, it's always easier to stand when you've got friends standing with you. So make sure you are on the lookout for this. This is why we cover news stories like that, to support bishops who do good work like that, to support priests who do good work like that, who say what needs to be said, whatever that issue is. If they're defending the Catholic position, support them so that they are encouraged to do so in other Catholic matters. But in regards to this Missouri Right to Life bill here, so this was, the bill was only approved 102 to 46 in the Missouri House, and it only passed the Missouri Senate 18 to 14.
Imagine voting against that.
I know. And again, as you say, there may have been other things in this bill that were causing some complications, but thank God it passed. Thank God that Governor Mike Kehoe signed it into law. And coming up in Missouri, in the November 3rd election, there is a potential amendment. Amendment 3 would repeal the state's 2024 amendment that enshrined a fundamental right to reproductive freedom, unquote, in the Missouri Constitution. So this Amendment 3 in Missouri would ban most abortions. There are some limited exceptions, but it would ban most abortions in Missouri. So pray for that. If you happen to be in Missouri, maybe you've got some of our listeners are down in that area, be ready for that amendment November 3rd. And we will report on those as they come up into election season, because I'm sure that's not the only pro-life issue that will be up for a vote. That's an ongoing issue here in the U.S.
Yes, I mean, thanks to the Supreme Court rollback, if I can call it that, we at least have this being, placed up for vote. But at the same time, there's something that's really, shocking to the conscience about the very idea that we're placing some of these things up for vote. Because this is about, well, do these human lives matter or not? Place your vote. And there's just something that's kind of like weird about that, and it should disturb us, but it's become very common. It's become like a typical political issue. Mm-hmm. But we ought to hear that and just kind of, pull back and reel back and go, well, what is wrong with us that we consider, human lives to be something that we can vote upon? That said, we need momentum in this regard. We need to do whatever we can to help those who are most vulnerable. So I'm at least glad to see that the movement is there, is in the direction toward actually helping to save these lives. One of the things that I've seen in regards to the pushback against laws like the Born Life Protection Act is the argument that, well, we don't possibly need that. That's what you keep saying. You keep saying that the politicians who vote against it say, well, it's just a straw man. It never happens. Yeah. And yet they refuse to vote to protect the children that they claim are not at risk. It's a really interesting kind of perspective. Like, oh, these children aren't at risk, and therefore we're not going to vote to protect them from the risk that isn't there. It's a really kind of interesting one. But maybe that's just because it is so difficult to defend in terms of like rhetoric. Like how if that isn't your defense, then really how do you defend it?
Yeah, exactly. Makes no sense.